Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight we're sailing back to the 14th century, a time of wooden ships, rotting teeth, and global pandemics so devastating they make 2020 look like a beach holiday. This is the story of the plague ships, creaking death traps packed with sailors, spice barrels, and enough disease-ridden rats to start a biblical sequel. You'll board as a desperate deckhand, hoping for coin and come ashore. Well, actually, you probably won't, because the odds of surviving this voyage are roughly equal to the odds of finding a clean bucket on board. Before you start scratching imaginary flea bites or wondering if your lymph nodes are feeling tender, take a second to like the video and subscribe, especially if your idea of a relaxing bedtime story includes maritime dysentery, hallucinations, and a slow descent into plague-soaked madness. Leave a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now close your eyes, take a deep breath, and prepare to die screaming. You're not a sailor, not really. You're a day labourer with strong arms, a weak stomach, and exactly 0 better options. You'd planned to spend the spring hauling crates at the docks for pennies, and maybe, if luck showed up for once in your life, find a steady gig at a tannery or a brewery. Something miserable, sure, but land-based and mostly plague-free. Instead, you made the fatal mistake of answering a man who said he needed hands for a short voyage. You heard short, you didn't ask for details. And now, here you are, being shoved up a gangplank by someone with more tattoos than teeth, onto a vessel that looks like it's been patched together with wishful thinking and fish guts. Your new home is a merchant cog, a sturdy little box with sails that groans even while docked, as if it already knows what it's in for. It's about 70 feet long, which sounds fine until you realise that half that space is taken up by cargo, and the other half by rats. The hull is blackened with salt, tar and thyme, and the whole thing reeks of sour sweat, mildew, and whatever died in the bilge last season. You wonder briefly if ships can be haunted. Then you meet the cook and decide, if anything is haunting this place, it's still alive. No one tells you where to sleep. There are no rooms, of course, no cabins unless you're the captain, and even that one's more wooden box with a door than anything remotely dignified. Everyone else just collapses wherever their body fits. You spot a coil of rope that looks marginally less damp than the rest of the deck and claim it. You'll regret this later when the fleas come, but for now, it feels like progress. There's something comforting about choosing your own corner of a floating hell. Your crewmates don't introduce themselves so much as they slowly become part of your sensory environment. One man wheezes like he's been inhaling chimney soot since birth. Another scratches his arms with the single-minded intensity of someone who's forgotten what it's like not to itch. They smell like fish, pickled onions, and men who think washing is a personal insult to the Almighty. Someone farts, no one reacts. This is your new family. The captain is a man named Guillaume, or William, or possibly just Cap'n, as everyone seems to shout it while avoiding eye contact. He's got a crooked back, one good eye, and a mouthful of dark stubs that used to be teeth. He doesn't talk much. When he does, it's usually to yell, or cough, or spit something unidentifiable over the side of the ship. You quickly learn that the less attention you attract from him, the better your chances of surviving the week. The food, if you can call it that, is a form of psychological warfare. You get a lump of hard tack that could be used as a building material, a thin soup that tastes like regret, and something the cook insists is dried beef but could very well be strips of old boots. There's ale technically, but it's sour and warm, and possibly alive. You drink it anyway. You'll learn to drink worse. As you settle in, you start to notice the sounds of the ship, the kind of thing no one warns you about until you're trying to sleep next to a man, with night terrors and a snore that could raise the dead. The wood groans, the rigging clanks, something, hopefully a rat and not something worse, scuttles overhead, and always there's the soft lapping of water against the hull, like the sea is whispering to itself about how delicious you'll be. By day, you're put to work swabbing the deck, shifting crates, and pretending not to notice when one of the barrels starts oozing something black and suspicious. You don't know what's inside most of them. Textiles, maybe. Dried goods. Spices. That's what they say anyway. What you do know is that the rats seem extremely interested in them. You've already counted more rats than crew, and they're not shy. One watches you eat. Another tries to nest in your blanket. You start to get the feeling that you are the cargo, and the ship belongs to them. No one talks about the plague, not directly, but you hear whispers, superstition, muttered prayers. One sailor clutches a talisman shaped like a hand, with an eye in the palm. Another wears garlic around his neck, which doesn't help the smell, but at least makes him slightly less edible. You overhear someone say that another ship, one out of Venice, came back empty. Crew all dead. The rats were still alive though, always the rats. At night, the wind dies down, and everything slows. You lie back on your coil of rope, bones aching, stomach growling, and stare up at the rigging. The stars blink above you, like indifferent gods, and the moon casts a pale light that makes everything look slightly ghostlier than it already does. Someone groans in their sleep. Another man coughs, deep and wet, the kind of cough that makes you inch away without even meaning to. You think about your choices. You think about what you'll do with your pay, assuming there is any. You think about shore, about dry land, about food that hasn't been stepped on. Then you hear a splash, not close, just far enough to make you wonder what fell overboard, or jumped. This is day one. You haven't even left port yet, and already you regret everything. Your ship doesn't have a name, at least not one anyone says out loud. Sailors are superstitious that way. Naming a ship is like naming a fever. It gives it power. Or maybe this vessel did have a name once, carved lovingly into its hull by an optimistic merchant decades ago. If so, it's long since been worn away by salt, barnacles, and the general indifference of the ocean. Now it's just the cog, or sometimes that bastard boat, depending on who's talking and whether it's leaking again. Spoiler, it is. From a distance, it might pass as charming, a stout little tub with high wooden sides and a single, flapping square sail. Up close, it's a different story. The timbers are warped from years of swelling and shrinking in salt water. Gaps between the planks have been stuffed with bits of cloth, pitch, and what looks suspiciously like wool from someone's old sock. Nails stick out at creative angles. The deck bows inward in the middle, as if the whole thing is trying to fold itself in half and be done with it. There's no helm, not really. Steering is done by a long, groaning tiller in the back, operated by whoever draws the short straw or is dumb enough to stand near it when orders are barked. The rudder is more hope than engineering. As for navigation, you have no compass, no charts, and only the vague direction of south, then east, then stop when you hit land or die. The captain claims he can read the stars, but judging by how many times this ship has limped back to port, missing both cargo and crew, that seems optimistic. Below deck things get worse. You take the creaking ladder down into the hold, and the air immediately changes, thick, damp, and sour. It smells like old rope, rat droppings, and human failure. The floor is slick with spilled brine, and something that might be fish oil, or blood, or possibly both. There's no lighting beyond a few smoking oil lamps, wedged into corners, and they do more to highlight the gloom than dispel it. You hear scratching in the walls. Then you see the rats. They are bold, numerous, and extremely well fed. The cargo is stacked haphazardly. Crates, sacks, barrels, lashed together with fraying ropes. You are told this voyage would carry spices, which sounds exotic until you see the sacks crawling with beetles and realise spices includes anything dry, edible, and vaguely fragrant. There's grain too, half of it moulding, the other half moving of its own accord. If you dig deep enough, you'll find the source: fleas, lice, and a small ecosystem of disease that has made this hold its home. And you, lucky soul that you are, have just moved in. There is no latrine, no chamber pots, no corner designated for privacy or bodily dignity. You go where you can, over the side if you're lucky, into a bucket if you're fast, or into your trousers if neither of those options present themselves in time. You get used to the smell quickly, which is its own horror. The crew doesn't talk about it. They just step over puddles and carry on. You learn to do the same. Sleeping arrangements are flexible. There are no hammocks, no bunks, no straw pallets. You sleep where you drop. That might be next to the cargo, on the damp planks of the deck, or curled up under the overhang of the stern, where at least the rain doesn't hit you directly in the face. Your blanket is your coat. Your pillow is your arm. Your dreams are a mix of dehydration, fever, and distant screaming from someone having night terrors about fish again. Privacy doesn't exist. You eat, sleep, relieve yourself, and suffer in full view of a dozen other men doing the same. After a while, everyone stops pretending to care. You'll be elbow deep in a crate of salted cod, while someone scratches a boil open 3 feet away. You'll be lashing down barrels, while 2 men argue over whose lice have the bigger bites. If you're lucky, they'll settle it without knives. Speaking of cod, the food is as wretched as everything else. You were already introduced to the culinary stylings of the ship's cook, but now you get the full tour. Hard tack that breaks in shards like stone, dried fish that smells older than Christianity, an ale that somehow manages to be both flat and foamy. You try not to think about what happens when the food runs out. The cook has a long knife and a suspicious fondness for salted meat. The fleas are inescapable. They live in the grain sacks, in your clothes, in your beard if you're unlucky enough to grow one. You scratch constantly. So does everyone else. Red welts rise on your arms and neck. Some get infected, others fester. You start to notice black specks hopping from person to person. No one seems concerned. You should be. You've started to recognise the subtle shifts in the ship's personality. When it creaks in a certain way, it means the ropes are loose. When it groans like an old man shifting in his sleep, it means something heavy just slid in the hold and might crush someone if you don't fix it. When it goes quiet, that's the worst. It means the wind has died. Or someone has. There's a certain hierarchy to the suffering. The officers, what few there are, have slightly better spots to sleep, slightly less mould on their bread, and slightly fewer rats in their boots. The rest of you make do. You trade scraps, stories, and superstitions. One man swears he saw a ghost in the rigging. Another claims the ship is cursed, which seems like stating the obvious. You keep your head down and your knife close, just in case. By the end of the 3rd day, your hands are covered in rope burns, and your feet are starting to blister inside your wet boots. Your back aches from lifting crates that shift and spill without warning. Your lips are cracked from salt air, and your eyes sting from smoke and sweat. You haven't stopped scratching in hours. You have no idea how many days this voyage will last. No one does. The captain refuses to say. You suspect he doesn't know either. At night, you lie on your damp rope coil, watching the stars wobble through the mist. You try to ignore the itching, the groaning, the sound of someone softly weeping below deck. You tell yourself it's fine. You're getting paid. Probably. You're headed for Genoa, a city you've never seen but have heard is full of wine, women, and all the good things land has to offer. You picture it now. Warm bread, dry beds, streets without rats. You tell yourself that this is all worth it. You lie to yourself. It helps you sleep. You could be forgiven for thinking that being trapped on a disease-riddled ship in the middle of a medieval plague would be the worst part of this journey. But that's only because you haven't spent enough time around your fellow crew members yet. Given the choice between sharing a meal with these men or licking the deck clean, you'd do well to choose the deck. At least, it doesn't snore. Your shipmates are not so much a crew as a random assortment of broken souls and questionable decisions that somehow learned to walk. Most were press-ganged, blackmailed, or simply too drunk to say no when asked if they wanted steady work. They're not sailors by trade. They're not even sailors by accident. They're just men who had nothing left to lose, which makes them unpredictable, unhygienic, and, on bad days, mildly homicidal. You fit in better than you'd like to admit. The cook, for example, has never seen a vegetable. You're not even sure he believes they exist. His name is Ansgar, but everyone just calls him Teeth, mostly because he doesn't have any. What he lacks in dentistry, he makes up for in body odour and a truly disturbing talent for making things taste like salted despair. He cooks with one eye open, one hand always on a cleaver, and a deep personal philosophy that seasoning is for heretics. You once caught him muttering to a pot of beans, like it owed him money. No one questioned it. Then there's the boatswain, a leathery man named Berthold, who smells like old rope and has the eyes of someone who's seen too much and chosen to learn nothing from any of it. He wears a shriveled rabbit's foot around his neck, spits over his shoulder every time someone says the word storm, and swears he once sailed through a sea serpent's mouth and lived. You don't believe him, but you also don't want to be the one to call him a liar. He's the kind of man who keeps a knife in his boot and another in your bunk, just to make a point. Most of the crew don't bother with names. You just know them by their features. There's Twitch, who hasn't slept in 3 days and probably isn't aware that he blinks with different eyes at different times. There's Groans, who has a back problem, a drinking problem, and a face problem. Namely, that it looks like it lost a bar fight with a barrel of nails. And there's Whistler, who insists he once served on a royal flagship, though he also once mistook a dolphin for a mermaid and tried to flirt with it. It didn't go well. Medical conditions are abundant and untreated. One man has a boil the size of a plum on his shoulder that he insists is healing nicely, despite the fact that it's starting to pulse. Another keeps coughing into his sleeve and telling everyone it's just the damp, which might be true, but doesn't explain the colour of the phlegm. You've seen at least 3 different kinds of rash, all of which are spreading. You've also seen someone try to lance a blister with a fishbone. There was a lot of screaming. And then there's the man who clearly already has scurvy. His gums are receding like the tide, his breath could knock out a mule, and he's been muttering about lemons in his sleep. You'd think someone would do something, but the general medical consensus on board seems to be sweat it out and pray. No one has fruit, no one has medicine, no one even has soap. What they do have is rum, dried meat, and a deeply superstitious faith in garlic. If there's one thing the crew has in common, it's that none of them know how to swim. Not a single one. This would be comical if it weren't also true of the captain. You've asked, quietly, offhandedly, as if it were a joke, and he responded with a long silence followed by, "God gave us ships for a reason." Apparently, the ability to float without lumber and prayer is seen as suspicious. Men who swim are rumoured to be witches. Men who drown are simply unlucky. This means that falling overboard is considered not just a risk but a death sentence. There's no safety net, no rope ladder, no heroic rescues. If you go over, that's it. You'll either be dragged under by your own waterlogged boots or nibbled to death by whatever lives in the deep. Maybe both. The only mercy is that most of the men here are too malnourished to be particularly buoyant. They'll sink fast. Despite their flaws, and there are many, your crewmates have one skill in abundance: complaining. They complain about the food, the captain, the sea, the wind, the lack of wind, the sun being too hot, the rain being too cold, and the rats being too friendly. One man spent an hour ranting about a seagull that looked at him wrong. Another broke down crying because his lice moved to a different leg. They are not stable men. But then again, neither are you. You learn quickly that it's best to keep your head down and your ears open. The wrong word at the wrong time can get you shoved, slapped, or, accidentally, struck with a swinging rope. Fights break out over nothing. A missing spoon, a spilled drink, a particularly aggressive snore. One man tried to strangle another because he sneezed in his direction. The only thing that keeps the violence in check is exhaustion. Everyone's too tired to kill each other more than once a week. What passes for camaraderie among the crew is mostly shared misery. You bond over injuries, terrible meals, and mutual disdain for the cook. Sometimes someone tells a story, usually a lie, often about treasure, women, or a miracle escape from pirates. You pretend to believe them. It's easier than pointing out the obvious. No one here is clever enough to have outwitted pirates. Most of them can't even outwit their own boots. But for all their faults, the men around you have one grim advantage. They've survived this long. Somehow, through luck, stubbornness, and sheer biological inertia, they've made it through voyages that should have killed them. You tell yourself, that means something. That maybe, just maybe, these are the kind of men who'll see you through the worst of what's coming. You don't really believe that, but you're going to need something to cling to besides the railing. You were told this ship was hauling valuable goods, spices from the east, fine grain, maybe even bolts of linen or wool, the kind of cargo that makes merchants rich and crewmen slightly less destitute, the kind of cargo that gives you hope that when this miserable voyage ends, you might actually have earned a few extra coins, instead of just blisters and gastrointestinal trauma. You believed it, or at least you pretended to. But after just a few days aboard, it's clear that whatever this ship was supposed to be transporting, what it's actually carrying is death. Crated, contained, and breeding. The hold, where most of the cargo is stored, is a masterclass in medieval neglect. It's hot, damp, and rank with the smell of old wood, old water, and very old grain. You've been below deck a few times now, mostly when ordered to fetch something, and each time it feels like stepping into the armpit of a sick ox. The air hangs heavy with mildew, and something far more putrid. There's no ventilation beyond a few warped gaps between boards, and the only light comes from sputtering oil lamps that cast more shadow than illumination. It's dark enough to trip over a barrel and die before anyone notices you're missing. The grain sacks are stacked in uneven piles, many of them already torn open and leaking. At first, you thought it was just poor handling. Now you know better. The rats are helping themselves. You've seen them, black-furred, glassy-eyed little monsters with twitching noses and too much confidence. They scurry over your boots, gnaw through leather, and stare at you like they're wondering whether you're edible. Some of them are unnervingly large, the size of small cats, with scars and missing tails that suggest they've been through a few wars of their own. You suspect they'd win in a rematch. You've given up trying to count them. They're everywhere. In the grain, in the textiles, in the gaps between crates. You once found one nestled inside a barrel of dried fruit, fat and smug, as if it had paid for the privilege. The crew occasionally sets traps, crude boards with nails, buckets of water, sometimes just someone with a club and a grudge. But it's like trying to fight the tide with a spoon. For every rat you kill, 3 more take its place. It's less of a battle and more of an understanding. This ship belongs to them. You're just the temporary crew. Of course, where there are rats, there are fleas. You noticed the itching on day 2. Now you scratch so much you're not sure where your skin ends and your scabs begin. The fleas are small, fast, and cruel. They bite without mercy, usually in the middle of the night when your guard is down, and you're briefly stupid enough to believe sleep is an option. The bites swell and redden, and a few of them have already begun to ooze. Everyone's covered in them. Legs, arms, necks. One man has them in his eyebrows. Another swears he found one in his ear. You believe him. No one talks about it openly, but the older sailors know what this means. You see it in the way they look at the grain sacks, in the way they refuse to sit too close to the textiles, in the way they whisper behind cupped hands about bad air and sick rats. One of them crossed himself when a dead rat was found on the deck, belly up, legs stiff. He didn't touch it, just stared at it like it was an omen, which, to be fair, it probably was. The official cargo manifest, a term you use loosely, as it's just a damp sheet of ink-smudged parchment tacked to the captain's cabin door, lists the usual: Sacks of wheat, bales of cloth, preserved fish, dried herbs, and something labelled only as exotic goods. You don't ask, no one asks. Whatever's in those crates rattles when the ship moves, and once you heard a hissing sound that definitely wasn't wind. Either it's pickled snakes' cursed relics or some particularly spicy nutmeg. You'd rather not know. What's not listed on the manifest are the real stowaways, not just rats and fleas, though they're bad enough, but something worse, something smaller, something with a Latin name you don't know and wouldn't understand. You'll learn it later if you live long enough. Yersinia pestis, a microscopic hitchhiker riding in the blood of fleas, passed from rat to human, from human to human, from ship to shore. You don't know its name, but you're already carrying it in your bloodstream. The first signs are subtle. A man gets a headache. Another complains of nausea. Someone develops a strange swelling under his arm. No one says the word plague, saying it is dangerous, saying it makes it real. Instead, they call it the sickness or the swelling, or more superstitiously, the devil's breath. One sailor insists it's just scurvy. Another says it's punishment for blasphemy. You keep your mouth shut, but you've noticed the same ache behind your eyes, the same tightening in your throat. You think back to when you first loaded the ship. The barrels were already warm. Some of the sacks were damp. No one questioned it. The dockhands were in a rush, the captain eager to set sail. It was a job. You took it. You didn't ask what might be living inside the crates, or what might crawl out of them when the lights go out. Now you wish you had. There's a particular crate that everyone avoids. It's in the far corner of the hold, lashed down with thick ropes and oozing something brown and sticky. You don't know what's in it. You don't want to know. But every time you pass it, the rats scurry away. That's the most alarming thing of all. Rats fear nothing on this ship. If they're avoiding something, you should too. Occasionally, someone tries to fumigate the hold, usually by lighting a bundle of herbs or tossing in a few clumps of smouldering resin. The effect is minimal. The air fills with smoke and bitterness. The rats disappear for an hour, and then everything returns to normal. Normal being a rank stew of disease, vermin, and slowly rotting humanity. You begin to understand that the hold isn't just carrying goods, it's carrying consequences. The crates aren't full of commerce, they're full of history, the worst kind. The kind that spreads without borders, without mercy, without needing a reason. You're not just a sailor on a trading voyage, you're a carrier, a vector, a walking warning sign for anyone foolish enough to greet you at your next port. The most valuable thing this ship will deliver isn't grain or cloth or herbs. It's death, and it travels faster than the wind. The morning you set sail, everything goes wrong. The kind of wrong that would make a sensible man stay ashore and take up something safer, like grave digging or pest control. First, there's the gull, dead, neck twisted, lying on the dock directly beneath the gangplank. No visible wounds, just a bloated corpse with clouded eyes and a trail of flies that dance across it like they've been rehearsing. No one moves it. You all step around it, pretending you didn't notice. The crew pretends it's not a bad omen. That's the first lie of the voyage. Then there's the injury. A young dockhand, barely more than a boy, slips while loading a crate and catches his leg on a jagged nail. The gash is deep, red, and immediately oozing. He screams, of course, which draws attention. Unwelcome, embarrassing attention. The captain curses, not out of concern, but because the delay might cost him favourable wind. The boy's carried off the dock, weeping into his sleeve, while someone else takes his place. No cleaning, no blessing, just blood on the planks and a bad feeling in your chest. You try to ignore. The priest arrives late, sweating and already muttering prayers before he even reaches the ship. He takes one look at the crew, the sky, and the ship's warped hull, and hesitates. It's not dramatic, just a small pause before raising his hand to bless the voyage, like his instincts are trying to pull him backward. but he goes through with it. He waves the incense, mumbles the rites, and flings holy water that smells mostly like brine. Then he walks away briskly, never once looking back. You get the sense he's done this before, and that he expects never to see you again. Still, the sails go up. The moorings are cast off. The ship groans as it's pulled from the safety of the harbour and nudged into the open sea, like a condemned man being walked to the scaffold. There's no fanfare, no cheering. Just a few seagulls, the slap of ropes, and the quiet realisation that there's no turning back now. The coastline begins to shrink. The smell of land, dung, smoke, rotting fish grows fainter. You replace it with the open stink of salt, wet wood, and whatever's festering in the hold. The first day is uneventful, if unpleasant. The sea is calm, the sky grey, and the wind steady enough to keep the sails full without pushing the ship too hard. You learn the rhythm quickly. Pull the ropes, bail the water, swab the deck, eat something dry and questionable, scratch yourself half to death, sleep badly, repeat. You think maybe this won't be so terrible after all. That maybe the omens were just nonsense. That maybe, just maybe, you'll survive this. Then comes day 2. The wind dies without warning. One moment, the sails are full. The next, they hang limp like flags at a funeral. The sea goes still, eerily still, as if holding its breath. The ship drifts, aimless and creaking, surrounded by an ocean that has forgotten how to move. The crew mutters about doldrums, curses the sky, blames each other for everything from bad luck to bad breath. No one has any solutions. The captain squints at the horizon like he can intimidate the weather into cooperating. It doesn't. You try to ignore it, but the silence is worse than the noise. You become hyper-aware of every sound. The dripping of water into the bilge, the wheezing breath of the man sleeping near your feet, the scratching of rats behind the planks, the whisper of your own heartbeat in your ears. It's oppressive. You start wishing for wind, any wind, even the kind that signals a storm. By day 3, the lice have outpaced the wind. They thrive in your clothes, your hair, your bedding, such as it is, and seem to multiply exponentially, like they're training for some kind of parasitic competition. You scratch until you bleed, then you scratch some more. Your skin is red and raw, dotted with bite marks and small scabs. Others fare worse. One man's back is covered in so many welts, it looks like he was flogged with nettles. Another has open sores that he insists are just from the heat. No one believes him. The cook tries to serve something he calls broth, but it's mostly water with a suspicious film on top, and something floating in it that might have once been edible. You drink it anyway. Not because you trust him, but because your mouth is dry and you're too tired to argue. The bread is hard. The fish is older than some of the crew. The ale has started to taste metallic. You suspect the barrels are rusting from the inside, but no one checks. There's tension now. You feel it in the way men snap at each other, over nothing. A misplaced rope, a spilled cup, a look that lasted too long. Small slights build like pressure in a sealed jar. You know it's going to explode eventually. You just hope it doesn't explode near you. One man punches a crate and breaks 2 fingers. Another throws a rat overboard and is immediately accused of dooming the voyage. The boatswain leads a chant to ward off evil spirits. No one laughs. Sleep becomes harder. You lie awake, itchy and anxious, listening to the creaking of the ship and the laboured breathing of your crewmates. Someone moans in their sleep. Someone else hums the same 3-note tune over and over again, like a prayer or a curse. You stare up at the stars, now partly hidden by clouds, and wonder how far you've come. You wonder how far you'll make it. You wonder if the priest knew something he didn't say. By the 4th day, you've stopped counting days. Time on a plague ship isn't measured in hours or leagues. It's measured in symptoms. You feel a tightness in your chest, a heat behind your eyes. You chalk it up to nerves, or lack of sleep, or maybe just the cumulative effect of festering anxiety an undercooked stew, but it nags at you, grows, festers, like everything else aboard this godforsaken boat. No wind, no rain, just stillness, sweat, and scratching. You're floating on an ocean that seems to have forgotten movement, a crew that's fraying at the edges, a ship that groans like it's remembering a better life. You begin to understand that this voyage isn't just cursed, it's deliberate, like the sea chose you, like the ship knew where it was going all along, and you're just along for the ride. Time loses all meaning once you're a few days out to sea, not because you're so overwhelmed by beauty and wonder, but because every hour is identical in its misery. The sky turns a dull, mottled grey. The water stretches forever in every direction, an endless expanse of sloshing boredom and occasional dread. The only way to tell what day it is comes from counting the new sores on your body, and the missing teeth from biting into the hard tack. You've already chipped one molar. It hums with pain every time you eat, which is unfortunate, because not eating guarantees worse things. Your mornings start with cold water splashing across the deck. Sometimes it's a wave. Sometimes it's someone vomiting. Occasionally, it's the sky deciding to spit on you, just to keep the atmosphere festive. The deck never fully dries, so your feet are always wet, your boots always squelch, and your socks have taken on the consistency of wet paper. The skin on your soles begins to peel in sheets. The crew calls it salt foot, or sometimes ocean rot. You're not sure which is more accurate, but both sound right. You stop looking too closely at your toes. You're expected to work, of course. Illness isn't an excuse, nor is exhaustion, nor is the creeping horror that your body is slowly decaying while still technically alive. You haul lines, patch sails, clean up after the sick, and swab the deck in an endless cycle. No one thanks you. No one thanks anyone. Gratitude doesn't exist out here. Neither does dignity. If you're lucky, the day passes without blood, broken bones, or someone collapsing mid-task. If you're unlucky, you're the one who collapses. The food doesn't improve. In fact, it seems to deteriorate alongside your morale. The hard tack now comes with the added bonus of weevils, which you're told to just eat. Extra protein, someone jokes. You don't laugh. You're too busy trying to extract a bit of soft centre from the otherwise rock-solid biscuit without snapping another tooth. The dried meat is stringy and unidentifiable. The cook says it's pork. You suspect otherwise. The ale, once tolerable, has turned bitter and now carries a smell not unlike vinegar and feet. You drink it anyway. There's nothing else. Sleep is hard to come by. Between the itch of lice, the sting of your salt-blistered skin, and the relentless groan of the ship's wooden bones, rest feels more like a hallucination than a reality. The hull creaks constantly, a slow, mournful song that seems designed to keep you in a state of low-grade panic. There are other noises too, the hacking coughs of your shipmates, the half-muttered prayers of the boatswain, and the wet retching of someone losing their last meal over the side. You become familiar with everyone's sick sounds. They're part of the background music now. When the seas are rough, vomiting becomes communal. Not in the warm, bonding way, just in the sense that once one man loses his stomach, it triggers a chain reaction of retching up and down the deck. You join in, clutching the rail with blistered hands, praying for the nausea to pass. It doesn't. Afterward, there's a sort of quiet shame that falls over everyone, as if collectively pretending it didn't happen will bring back your dignity. It won't. It's floating somewhere behind the ship with your last half-digested meal. You start to forget what it's like to be dry. Your clothes, even when the sun comes out, never fully lose the damp. Your skin, once relatively smooth, now cracks and flakes. Your fingernails are darkened, either with dirt, blood or mould. It's hard to tell anymore. You develop a rash on your thighs that spreads in angry red lines, like vines of humiliation climbing your legs. Someone gives you a bit of oily salve to rub on it. It doesn't help, but it's the closest thing to medical care you'll get. Even your mind begins to feel soft around the edges. The constant discomfort, The sameness of every day, the gnawing fear of illness, it starts to fray you. You find yourself zoning out mid-task, staring at the horizon and wondering if maybe you're already dead, and this is the afterlife. A wet, creaking limbo staffed by sailors with too many boils and too few brain cells. If this is purgatory, it's at least thematically appropriate. Your shipmates don't improve with time. Hygiene continues to deteriorate. One man stops speaking altogether, communicating only in grunts and hand gestures. Another begins talking to a wooden spoon as if it's his long-lost brother. You think he might be joking until you hear him whisper to it late at night with a level of tenderness you haven't seen since shore. Someone tries to start a sing-along once, a sea shanty about rum and lost love. It ends in an argument and a headbutt. No one sings after that. Injuries are inevitable. Blisters pop and fester. Cuts refuse to close. A man drops a crate on his foot, splitting 2 toes nearly in half. The captain glances at it, mutters something about soaking it in seawater, and walks away. The toe turns black. The smell is worse. Eventually, the foot disappears entirely. No one asks where it went. No one really wants to know. You wrap your own hands in filthy cloth and hope that whatever infection you're brewing hasn't named itself yet. You dream of food now. Not the hard tack or the salted meat, but real food. Warm bread, roast chicken, fresh fruit. You dream of pears so juicy they run down your chin, of cheese that doesn't smell like regret, of clean water, the kind that comes from a well, not a barrel, the kind that doesn't taste like wood. You wake from these dreams with your mouth dry and your stomach turning, and you stare at the beams above your head, wondering if the gods are laughing. By the time another week passes, if it has only been a week, you start to feel less like a person and more like part of the ship. You creak when you move. You leak. You smell like wood and mildew. You've started to scratch without thinking, twitch without noticing, and mumble curses under your breath, like a background chant. Your beard grows in patchy and wild. Your eyes feel gritty. You haven't smiled in days, and through it all the sea just stretches on, uncaring. The sky shifts from grey to darker grey. The wind returns in sputtering gasps, only to vanish again when you need it. You're forgotten by the world, drifting slowly across an ocean that no longer seems to care whether you reach land or simply rot where you float. And deep in your chest, in the quiet moments, you feel it, that slow, spreading certainty that something is wrong inside you. Not just mentally, not just emotionally, but physically. You're changing. The itch is worse, the heat behind your eyes grows. You try to swallow it down. You try not to think about it, but you know what's coming. You notice the cough first. It's quiet at first, almost polite, like a man trying not to disturb the mood. Just a clearing of the throat here, a stifled wheeze there. Everyone hears it. No one says anything. After all, who isn't coughing these days? You all breathe the same sour air, drink from the same suspect barrel, and sleep beside the same sweating bodies. Coughing's just part of life on the ship, like lice, splinters, or existential despair. But this one is different. It grows louder, sharper, a wet, rattling bark that turns heads. It comes from a man called Mathieu, though nobody knows if that's his first name, last name, or something he made up to sound like less of a criminal. He was wiry once, a fast climber in the rigging with more tattoos than teeth. Now he's curled up by the foremast, shivering in the sun, his face flushed and his breath whistling through cracked lips. By the next day, Mathieu can't stand. His skin burns with fever, his hands tremble, and when he opens his mouth to speak, nothing comes out but a hoarse rasp followed by another round of coughing. He vomits over the side, missing the water entirely. The splash of half-digested fish and bile hits the hull and slides down with the sad determination of someone trying to leave the ship on its own. He's not alone for long. Another man follows, Yannick, the one with the missing toe. His face is waxy, his eyes red-rimmed, and he can't stop scratching the side of his neck. When he pulls back his hand, his fingers are streaked with blood. He doesn't seem to notice, or care. He collapses on the deck a few hours later, twitching like he's being shocked by invisible lightning. You haul him to a shadier spot, not out of kindness, but because the sight of him convulsing is making the others uncomfortable. It's around this time you start hearing the whispers. Not full sentences, just fragments. The sickness, the swelling, the bad air. No one says plague. Saying it feels like giving up. Saying it means you know that the stories are true, that the rats, the fleas, the coughing, the fever, it's all adding up to something worse than a bad voyage. So instead, they lean on the usual suspects: cursed wind, foul water, angry saints. One man hangs a wooden cross around his neck. Another shouts at the sky. The rest just sweat and hope. By the end of the week, Matteau is gone. Not dead, gone. One moment he's lying there, wheezing and mumbling about his mother. The next, he's screaming. Full body, open-mouthed, blood-curdling howls that send rats scattering and freeze everyone in place. He tears at his tunic, exposing a lump on his neck the size of an egg. Then another on his groin. His skin has turned a splotchy grey-purple, as if bruised from the inside out. He lurches once, twice, then collapses. You think that's the worst of it, until the smell hits. There's a sound too, a soft tearing like fabric wet with stew. His skin splits. A boil bursts. The pus is thick, yellow, and bubbling with something foul. It drips through the deck boards and pools beneath him. No one touches the body. No one speaks. Eventually, someone covers it with a tarp, then moves away, pretending he was never there. Mathieu has ceased to exist. As far as the crew is concerned, that's as close to a funeral as he's going to get. Soon others follow, not all at once, but fast enough to make you wonder if there's a pattern. The symptoms are always the same. First the fever, then the vomiting, then the swellings, under the arms, at the neck, near the groin. The skin stretches until it can't anymore. Then it splits. Sometimes it leaks, sometimes it sprays, sometimes it just oozes. You've developed a new instinct. Don't stand too close to anyone who starts to itch. The captain finally takes notice when one of the officers starts coughing blood. He calls a meeting, though half the crew are either too sick to attend or too afraid to leave their corners. He paces the deck, eyes sunken, muttering about bad humours and rot in the barrels. He orders the hold to be sealed, which would be helpful if the plague hadn't already made itself at home in the flesh of every other sailor. The rats, for their part, remain healthy, fat, cheerful, mocking. You try to keep your distance. You eat alone when you can. You sleep farther from the group, though the smell wafts anyway. You avoid touching your face, your mouth, your eyes. You boil your water, even though it still tastes like wood. You whisper prayers you don't believe to saints you've never liked. And still, the itch gets worse. You wake one morning with a pain in your armpit. It's dull at first, just a little pressure. But by evening, it feels like something inside you is trying to punch its way out. The skin is hot, swollen. You poke at it once, just once. The pain nearly makes you black out. You tell no one. There's no doctor, no medicine. The closest thing you have to treatment is the cook's garlic soup and the boatswain's ritual chants. One involves breathing in burning herbs. The other involves chicken bones and a lot of shouting. Neither seems to help. But the men cling to these rituals the way drowning men cling to driftwood. It gives the illusion of control. And in this floating madhouse, illusion is the closest thing to sanity. By now, more than a third of the crew is either dead or dying. The deck has become a makeshift hospital and morgue. Bodies are covered with rags and shoved toward the sides. No one wants to go below deck anymore. The air is thicker down there, fouler, like it's absorbed the suffering and refuses to let it go. Above deck isn't much better, but at least you can breathe without gagging. You stop asking names. You stop learning faces. Everyone blurs together, A parade of boils, sweat and coughing. The man you shared rations with yesterday is a corpse today. The one who shared a joke last night is leaking blood from his nose and shaking uncontrollably. You try to shut it out. You try to focus on the rope in your hand, the horizon ahead, the motion of the waves beneath you. But it's hard to ignore the fact that you're on a floating coffin, a plague ship in the truest sense. You were promised spices. You were promised pay. You were promised a future. What you got was pestilence, panic, and a slow, ugly death. You still haven't said the word out loud, but now it echoes in your head. Plague. And you know it's already too late. Land. For a few glorious, delusional minutes, it's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. A thin brown line on the horizon that thickens into a distant coastline. A haze of green hills and clustered buildings, promising dry beds, clean water, and food that hasn't been gnawed on first. You laugh when you spot it, genuinely, involuntarily, like the sound surprises your own throat. You point. Others point. Even the men too sick to stand squint into the sun and smile. You feel like survivors, like explorers returning home, like maybe this nightmare has a conclusion that doesn't involve being eaten alive by your own lymph nodes. Then the port lowers the chains. It happens slowly, almost theatrically. You see the harbour bustle into motion. Workers scramble, bells ring, and a heavy iron chain is hoisted from the water and drawn taut across the mouth of the harbour. Another one follows, then another. A crisscross of barriers where there should be welcome. Men with poles gesture from the docks, not with greetings, with warnings. They wave red flags. Some hold torches. One man simply makes the sign of the cross, then turns and walks away. You don't speak the local dialect, but you get the message loud and clear. You're not docking, ever. The captain tries to argue. He shouts from the quarterdeck, arms raised, voice hoarse with desperation and phlegm. He orders a signal flag run up the mast, white with a black stripe, the universal sign of distress. It flaps pathetically in the wind, ignored by everyone on shore. He tries again, this time in Latin. The port responds with silence, followed by a cannon fired into the air. Not aimed, not yet, just a warning. The crew's brief flicker of hope dies like everything else on this ship. You're close enough to smell bread baking on the breeze. Close enough to see women washing clothes along the shore. Close enough to hear church bells ringing in the distance. Civilization is right there, but it might as well be another continent. You float offshore, quarantined without ceremony. The ship begins to drift in lazy, demoralized circles just beyond the reach of salvation. You drop anchor, but the sea is shallow, and the current unpredictable, so you keep shifting, pivoting, swinging like a dying animal in a noose. The coast taunts you with every bob of the hull. No one knows what to do next. Some of the crew sink into quiet despair. They stare at the shoreline, unmoving, eyes glazed. Others shout, at the sky, at the land, at each other. One man starts blaming the rats again. Another blames the captain. The captain blames godless merchants and soft-bellied cowards who fear the hand of the Lord. The cook just keeps boiling his watery stew. Nobody eats it. Food runs low faster than you expect, partly because the sick stop eating, partly because the rats do not. They continue their rampage through the hold with cheerful efficiency. The grain sacks are shredded. The barrels leak. The preserved meat grows slick with mould and a disturbing blue fuzz. At least one man eats it anyway. You lose sight of him after that. Maybe he's dead. Maybe he's hiding in the rigging. You're not sure which you'd prefer. Water's worse. The barrels were never clean to begin with, and now the brackish mix sloshes out more rot than hydration. You start straining it through cloth, then through your teeth. Eventually, you just drink, and try not to think about what's floating in it. You pretend the grit on your tongue is salt. You pretend the aftertaste isn't fungal. The smell is indescribable, a mix of blood, bile, feces, infection, sweat, and rot. Your nose stops noticing after a while. Your eyes don't. They water constantly. The air on deck is so thick with stink it feels chewable. The sails have absorbed it, the wood too. The entire ship has become a floating sponge of decay, and you're soaking in it. Bodies pile up. At first you try to give them dignity. You wrap them. Say a few words. Slide them into the sea with some semblance of solemnity. But as the death toll rises, the effort fades. Soon you're just dragging corpses to the rail and tipping them overboard, like sacks of spoiled grain. You don't even check for pulses anymore. If they're not moving and they smell worse than usual, they go over. Simple system. The sea around the ship begins to attract attention. Not from fish, mercifully, but from gulls, dozens of them, then hundreds. They circle, scream and dive. They fight over bloated bodies. You stop looking over the side. You've seen enough. The men grow quieter. Conversations dwindle into coughs, then into silence. You hear muttering at night, prayers, curses, nonsensical babbling from fevered minds. One man sobs in his sleep. Another sings nursery rhymes in a cracked whisper. Someone starts writing letters to their wife on bits of sailcloth. You don't ask what he plans to do with them. The quarantine doesn't lift. No one comes, no messages, no boats, just the chains, still in place, rusting in the salt air while you drift a mile offshore like a disease in a bottle. The port isn't taking chances. They know what's on this ship. Or maybe they don't know, and that's worse. To them, you're not a ship. You're a rumour, a shadow, a maybe plague, maybe cursed vessel full of maybe dead men. After a while, the coastline becomes a kind of torture. Every breeze that carries the smell of bread or fruit or firewood is a fresh wound. You dream of it at night. You imagine swimming ashore, crawling up the beach, collapsing in a church doorway, and being saved. But you don't swim. No one does. Even if you tried, you'd probably drown, or be shot, or just collapse halfway there and drift back like a bloated warning. You wonder if anyone in that port ever talks about you, if they tell their children, out there floats a ship of the damned, if they pray for your souls, or if they just look away and go back to their lives. Safer not to ask questions, safer not to get involved, safer to leave you to rot. Eventually, the idea of being rescued stops even entering your mind. You no longer fantasize about docking or bathing or even being spoken to by another human being. You fantasize about rain, clean, heavy rain that washes the deck and your skin and your lungs. You fantasize about silence, real silence, without the background wheezing and moaning and wood groaning under the weight of death. Instead, you get more waiting, and the smell. Always the smell. The end doesn't come all at once. It never does. It trickles in slowly, like seawater through a cracked hull. Quiet, constant, and devastating once you finally notice it's too late to fix. You're still floating offshore, trapped in a limbo of salt and silence, waiting for someone to care enough to let you die on land. But the world has moved on. The port hasn't opened its gates. The chains still hang across the harbour, rusted now but sturdy, like the town built them just for you. It's been days or weeks. You've stopped keeping track. The sun rises and falls like a coin flipped in the sky, sometimes blinding, sometimes absent. Time blurs. You measure the passing of it in stomach cramps, in the groans of the dying, in the number of rats left to chase. The ship creaks less now, not because it's sturdier, but because no one's moving enough to disturb it. Even death has started to settle in. Food runs out first. It doesn't vanish so much as dissolve. Barrels, once half full of salted meat, are now slick with mould. Grain sacks ripped apart by rats. Hard tack so infested with larvae that even the boldest crewman won't touch it. One man tries to eat a boot, boils it first in seawater, cuts it into strips, chews until his gums bleed. He claims it tastes like pork. You hope he's lying, but you're not sure what would be worse, that he's wrong or that he's right. Another man eats something worse. You don't know what it was. He wouldn't say. Just sat in the corner, chewing, eyes wide and empty, You didn't ask questions. You've learned not to. If someone finds something vaguely edible, even if it twitches, you let them have it. That's the rule now. You don't interfere with a man's survival. The fights begin soon after. At first they're brief. Arguments over rations, water, who gets to sleep in the least damp corner, shoving, name-calling, the occasional slap. But it escalates. One man accuses another of stealing his stash of dried apples. Apples that may or may not have existed in the first place. A knife is drawn. It ends with blood smeared across the railing and a body tipped into the sea. No one intervenes. No one says a word. It's become easier to let it happen. You hear voices now. Not always full sentences, but enough to make your skin crawl. Your name whispered from behind a barrel. Laughter echoing from below deck. Your mother's voice calling you to dinner, even though she's been dead for 10 years, and the only meal on board is despair with a side of hallucination. You tell yourself it's just the hunger, the fever, the rot in your gums working its way up to your brain. But a small part of you, starved, superstitious and exhausted, starts to wonder if the ship is speaking back. You've begun talking to yourself. At first it was just muttering, curses under your breath, prayers you don't remember how to finish, but now you carry full conversations in whispers, telling stories to no one, apologising to the empty sky, asking questions to rats who don't answer. You see others doing the same. You pass a man who's singing to a rope, stroking it like a pet. Another sits on a crate and rocks back and forth, murmuring the same word, open, over and over. You don't ask what he means. You're afraid you'll agree. You start to think the cook is dead. No one's seen him in 2 days. The last meal he made was a thin broth that tasted like metal and left several men vomiting blood by morning. Since then, the galley's been silent. You knocked once on the door, half out of concern, half out of hunger. No answer. You didn't knock again. If he's alive, he's hiding. If he's dead, he's the lucky one. Your dreams are worse now. When you sleep, you see hands reaching for you from the water. Teeth in the dark. A city made of bones. You wake gasping, drenched in sweat, your skin crawling with things that might be real or might just be memories. You no longer trust your own senses. You've stopped trying to sort truth from delirium. The line has faded. Your friend, if you can call anyone on this ship that anymore, was named Tom. He was a deckhand like you, with a crooked smile and a scar over his eye from some long-forgotten brawl. He shared his water when you were dry, his stories when you couldn't sleep, and once a dried fig he'd been saving for weeks. You'd started to believe the two of you might make it, that at least one person would be there when you stepped onto land again. He died in his sleep, or maybe he just stopped moving. You found him curled in his usual corner, eyes open, lips cracked, body still. You sat with him for an hour before anyone else noticed. Then you wrapped him in a scrap of canvas and dragged him to the side. You wanted to say something, a prayer, a goodbye, but nothing came. The words were gone. All you could manage was a whisper, something soft and shapeless, more breath than language, as you let him slip beneath the waves. You didn't watch him sink. You couldn't. Now it's just you, and the others. But they're changing too. Gaunt faces, hunched bodies, eyes that no longer blink in sync. You suspect some of them died days ago, and just haven't had the courtesy to fall over yet. The ship creaks more now, as if mourning its passengers. The wood groans under the weight of your collective failure. You stop going below deck. The darkness down there feels too thick, too final. You sleep on the open planks, curled under a scrap of sail, staring up at the stars and hoping they'll blink out and take you with them. You no longer care about docking, or food, or rescue. You only want silence, stillness, an end. But the ship keeps drifting, and the rats keep scurrying, and you somehow keep breathing. There's a moment when you stop being sick and start being something else entirely. Your body doesn't give up, not exactly. It just stops pretending it's in control. You're not steering the ship of yourself anymore. You're tied to the mast, delirious and burning, watching as your mind is slowly unstitched by fever. You sweat through your clothes, then your skin, then somehow your soul. It starts with the dreams. At least, you think they're dreams. You see your mother standing at the end of the deck, dressed in her church best, holding a basket of oranges. She smiles in that half-judging, half-proud way she used to, and then, without warning, she's gone. Replaced by a priest with no face. Just smooth flesh where eyes and mouth should be, muttering words that melt into static. You wake in a puddle of your own drool, clutching your blanket like it might explain anything. Soon the lines between sleep and waking begin to dissolve. You see things during the day now. A rat that speaks in the captain's voice, asking why you haven't finished your duties. A dead crewman, sitting upright, casually flossing his teeth with fishing line. Shadows that crawl the wrong way. Once you see the mast bend and twist, like it's trying to shrug off the sails. You blink, it's back to normal. You stop trusting your eyes, but there's nothing else to rely on. You cry one morning. Not loudly, not in any performative way, just quietly, face pressed against the wooden planks of the deck, tears soaking into the splintered grain. The deck smells like everything you've lost: salt, sweat, vomit, urine, rot. It's the scent of humanity slowly giving up. You breathe it in and think, yes, this is right. This is where I belong now. The others don't speak to you anymore. Or maybe they do, and you just can't hear them over the rushing in your ears. Sometimes you see their mouths moving, but it's like watching fish gasp on land, silent, useless. One man hands you something, a piece of cloth, maybe food, but it turns to ash in your hands, crumbling into nothing before you can blink. You're not even surprised. You forget your name sometime around sunset. You try to say it to yourself, just to feel grounded, but all that comes out is a rasp. Then silence. You try again, mentally walking through your own memories, like a foggy cathedral. You can remember things, faces, the smell of bread, the way your mother braided your hair when you were small, but not who you are. That piece has floated away, maybe overboard. You do remember, though, that you used to not be dying. That was nice. There was a time when you weren't a sack of bones wrapped in fevered skin, when your hands didn't tremble, and your thoughts weren't just looping echoes. You remember walking barefoot through grass. You remember a dog, or maybe it was a goat, something with fur and eyes that trusted you. That memory makes you weep harder than anything else. The fever cooks your body slowly, like meat left too close to the fire. Your joints ache with every movement. Your skin flushes, then cools, then flushes again. As if it can't decide whether to melt or freeze, your fingers swell, your lips crack, your mouth tastes like rust and sour milk. You try to drink water, but it won't stay down. Your body is rejecting its own existence. At some point the ship tilts, or maybe you do. You lie on your side and stare at the sky, which pulses like it's breathing. Clouds swirl into shapes. First a ship, then a skull, then your father's face, scowling like he used to when you spilled ale on the floor. He says something, but it's drowned out by the sound of bells. You can't tell if they're real or not. You can't tell if anything is real or not. You hear music one night, gentle, lilting, like a lullaby played on a flute made of bone. It floats across the deck, soft and sweet. You follow it, dragging yourself hand over hand toward the sound, only to find the source is a broken plank, rubbing against the mast in the wind. You laugh, or maybe you scream. The difference feels academic at this point. You hallucinate food. That's the cruelest one. Piles of roasted meat, bowls of steaming porridge, apples so fresh they glisten. You reach for them and get nothing but your own scabbed fingers. You chew anyway just to remember what it felt like. Your teeth ache, your jaw cracks, you spit out blood and splinters. It was never real. You see a woman on the water, pale, glowing, floating just above the waves. Her hair flows behind her like seaweed, her arms outstretched. She beckons. You crawl to the rail, unsure whether you plan to wave or jump. She vanishes before you decide. You sit there for a long time, blinking at the empty sea. Someone dies near you. You hear it. A final breath, a shudder, then stillness. You don't turn your head. You can't. You just count the seconds afterward, like it's a game. How long until someone notices? How long until they care? No one comes. The body stays where it is. Eventually, you stop hearing the flies. That's how you know it's over. The ghosts arrive quietly. You never see them directly, just out of the corners of your vision. Shapes that move like people, but vanish when you focus. They sit near you at night, pressing cold fingers into your shoulder. They whisper things you almost understand. You think one of them used to be the first mate. You think one might be you from a few days in the future. Your hallucinations become comforting, familiar, better than the real ship. The real ship is full of death and rot and groaning wood. The imaginary one is full of memories, of moments before everything fell apart. You spend more time in that ship than this one. You like it better there. At some point, you forget why you're here, not just your name, but your purpose. Were you a sailor, a prisoner, a merchant? It doesn't matter anymore. All that matters is the next breath, and the next, and whether this one will be your last. You stop hoping for rescue. You stop fearing death. You just wait. And even that feels like a hallucination now. When death finally arrives, it doesn't come with fanfare. There is no glowing light, no divine choir, no peaceful sigh of release. It isn't quiet, and it certainly isn't noble. It's slow, wet, undignified. You don't slip away in your sleep, clean and serene. You go like everything else on this ship, ragged, gasping, leaking from places that shouldn't leak. You die in pieces, losing parts of yourself long before the final moment. The first thing to give out is your breath. It doesn't stop all at once, it struggles. Your lungs fill with phlegm, thick and black like tar scraped from the bottom of a lantern. You cough until your ribs ache, your throat tears, and your body trembles with every wheeze. You try to sit up. You can't. Your muscles have stopped listening to you. You lie on your back, watching the sky spin through the rigging, and feel the weight of the ship pressing down on your chest like it's trying to finish the job. You feel cold, then hot, then cold again. Your skin sweats and shivers. Your pulse thumps in strange rhythms. You're burning up, but your fingers are blue. You can't keep your eyes open for long. When you do, the shapes around you seem unfamiliar. Is that the cook crouching nearby, or a pile of rags? Is that whispering you hear, or just the creak of the ropes? It's all drifting now, blurring, sinking. You choke on your own bile, thick, putrid, and bubbling up from somewhere deep inside you. It's not just vomit, it's black, streaked with red, with the sour smell of decay before death. You try to swallow it down, but your body refuses. It comes up again, flooding your mouth, burning your throat. You turn your head, or think you do. Most of it ends up on your chest. You feel it soak into your shirt, sticky and warm. You stop caring. Your lips crack as you gasp. Your tongue feels like it's made of parchment. Your mouth tastes of rust and rot. You try to say something, though you're not sure what. Maybe a name, maybe a prayer, maybe just a sound to prove you're still here. Nothing comes out. Not even air, just a gurgling noise, barely human. You realise you haven't spoken in days, or is it weeks? No one is with you, not really. There might be a man slumped nearby, but he's not watching, he's not moving. He might be dead too. You've stopped checking. The line between the living and the dead blurred long ago. The only difference is the smell, and even that's unreliable. Some of the dying reek worse than the corpses. Some of the corpses still twitch. There is no marker waiting for you, no candle to be lit, no one writing down your name in a ledger. You'll be lucky if someone remembers which direction you rolled when your body stopped moving. You will not be buried, you will not be mourned, you will not be remembered. You'll be heaved over the side like waste, dead weight with no more value than the rotting wood beneath you. You are one of tens of millions, a statistic, a line in a dusty history scroll, another nameless soul devoured by a bacterium too small to see and too successful to stop. Yersinia pestis. It doesn't care who you are, what you wanted, what you feared. It doesn't even know your name. It's just here to multiply, to consume, to move on. There's something almost poetic about it, this invisible enemy, riding fleas that ride rats that ride ships like yours. An army of ghosts wearing no armour, wielding no swords, just heat, and swelling, and collapse. It invaded your blood while you hauled rope, while you dreamed of Genoa, while you clung to the hope of landfall. And now it finishes what it started, humming through your veins, like a song only your body can hear. You think in your final moments about things you never did, not grand adventures or noble deeds. Those were never in your reach, just small things. A warm bath, a bed without fleas, a bowl of stew where you could actually taste the meat, a quiet evening with someone who didn't smell like mildew and infection, a laugh that wasn't followed by a cough. You try to hold on to one memory, just one, to carry with you as your body falls apart. Maybe a face, maybe a place, but your mind is unravelling. All the images blur. Was that your brother's voice? Or just the groan of the mast? Was that your village in the distance? Or a cloud shaped like a steeple? You can't tell. The reel is broken, but the story won't finish. Your final breath rattles out through cracked, blistered lips. It's not a sigh. It's not peaceful. It's a choke. A wet, final sputter like a wine jug being emptied too fast. Your chest falls, doesn't rise again. Your fingers twitch once, then curl. Your eyes stay open, staring at the nothing above you. No one notices for a while. No one comes to close them. Eventually, someone will find you, or trip over you, or smell you, and you'll be dragged to the edge of the ship by hands too weak to lift you gently. You'll hit the water without ceremony, without prayer, without weight, a splash, then silence, then nothing. The sea doesn't care. The sea takes everything. You are not special. You are not missed. You are dead. And the ship sails on. The ship doesn't sink. It never does. That would have been too merciful. A clean break, a dramatic end swallowed by the sea, forgotten beneath the waves. But no. The ship drifts, aimless, skeletal, quiet. Long after its final breath of wind, it floats on, cradled by a sea that has no use for the dead and no patience for closure. Eventually, it finds land. Not a bustling port, not the city you were promised, but a stretch of forgotten coastline where the water meets sand and the wind finally dies. The hull groans against the shore, timbers creaking in a final protest as it runs aground. No one is alive to drop anchor. No one lowers a gangplank. It just settles there, rocking gently, as if pretending it still has a purpose. The locals spot it within a day. At first it's a curiosity, a distant silhouette beached at an odd angle, sails tattered, mast half snapped. No signal flags, no sign of movement, no crew waving for help. Just a husk, a tempting eerie mystery. Rumours ripple through the nearby town. Some say it's a merchant vessel, abandoned mid-voyage. Others whisper of pirates or smuggling, or a mutiny gone wrong. A few elders warn against approaching it at all. Bad air, one mutters. Ships that drift bring sickness. But the warnings are ignored. There's profit to be made. The first scavengers arrive within hours. Young men with ropes, sacks and bold expressions. They paddle out in small boats, boards creaking under their excitement. They climb aboard and find exactly what they hoped for. Crates of textiles, barrels of grain, bundles of spices, even a few items of jewellery, still clinging to corpses like offerings to a god that never listened. The bodies are shoved aside, looted or ignored entirely. The smell is unbearable, but the lure of free goods is stronger than a weak stomach. They take everything. The grain is hauled away, despite being partially gnawed. The cloth is torn from crates and held up to the sun. The spices are gathered with reverence, poured into sacks as if they're sacred. No one stops to question the dead. No one wonders how so many men could die so quietly. No one notices the fleas leaping from sack to sack, from wood to skin, from body to boot. By the next morning, the ship is empty. What isn't stolen is broken. What isn't broken is crawling. The rats, emboldened by the silence and the absence of boots stomping above them, claim what remains. They move freely through the hull, sniffing, chewing, nesting. They find the corners where fever-slicked hands once trembled. They nibble the edges of letters never finished. They thrive, and they carry with them something invisible, something old, efficient, and insatiable. Back in the village, the first cough seems innocent. The baker's son, flushed with pride from helping carry a barrel of grain, starts feeling warm. By evening, he can't stop sweating. The following day, his mother notices a swelling under his arm. It grows, bursts. She doesn't last much longer. Then it's the merchant who bought the spices. Then the old man who touched one of the looted cloaks. Then the priest who tried to offer last rites to a boy already too far gone. The sickness doesn't creep. It explodes. The town, small and unprepared, begins to unravel. They try to flee. They try to pray. They try to burn the bodies. Nothing works. It's too late. The plague spreads faster than the truth. By the time someone thinks to blame the ship, it's already out of sight, consumed by tides or torched in a feverish attempt at justice. Maybe they burn it. Maybe they simply abandon it to rot where it crashed. It doesn't matter. The damage is done. The rats have moved on. The fleas have found new hosts. The disease doesn't care where it started. It only cares where it can go next. History, years from now, will call it a tragedy. It will be studied, debated, reduced to timelines and maps and scholarly analysis. They'll track infection routes, estimate body counts, and write heavy tomes filled with theories. They'll blame the rats, the sailors, the ignorance of the age. They'll whisper words like pandemic and quarantine and epidemiology. They'll forget your name, of course, because no one ever wrote it down, but they'll remember the death. They'll say it was a disaster. But for you, it was just Tuesday. You didn't die a hero. You didn't save anyone. You didn't go out in a blaze of defiance or sacrifice. You died sweating on splintered wood, coughing up your own organs, with no one watching and nothing left to lose. You were one of many, a vessel for a parasite, a stepping stone for a plague that didn't even notice it stepped on you. And even that would be almost noble, if not for the simple fact that your death meant nothing. Not in the moment, not to your crew, not to the village you doomed by accident. You were doomed from the start. From the first rope you hauled, the first rat you ignored, the first itch you didn't question. Your part in this was never choice, just proximity. And that's the real horror of it. You weren't chosen, you weren't cursed, you were just there.